Imagine taking a quiet walk along the shore and seeing a shoe in the driftwood. That wouldn't be strange by itself, but then you get closer and you realize the shoe is not empty. There's a human foot inside. Now imagine that happens again, and again, and again. Different beaches, different years, same horrifying detail. A foot, often still inside a sneaker, washing ashore as if the water has decided to return people one piece at a time. For more than a decade, that really happened in the waters of the Salish Sea, the inland sea stretching between British Columbia and Washington state. And what made it so disturbing wasn't just the body parts, it was the pattern. This is the story of the place where strange things kept washing ashore, and why the truth turned out to be almost as unsettling as the mystery itself. The story begins on August 20th, 2007, on Jedediah Island in British Columbia. A young girl walking on the beach found what looked like a shoe. Inside it was a human right foot, still in a sock and sneaker. That is the kind of discovery that instantly changes the atmosphere of a place. A beach stops being a beach, it becomes a crime scene. And then, just 6 days later, on Gabriola Island, another foot was found, also a right foot, also in a running shoe. At that point, no one was thinking natural explanation. 2 feet in less than a week, in neighboring waters, both right feet? That sounds like a message. Or a killer. Or something so bizarre that the human brain starts reaching for stories faster than facts. By the time news spread, the region was already falling under the spell of a mystery that felt too strange to be random. People wondered if there was a serial killer operating in the Pacific Northwest, if organized crime was disposing of bodies offshore, or if some unknown catastrophe had thrown remains into the sea. And the water wasn't finished. Because what made the first 2 discoveries so chilling was not just that they happened, it was that they were only the beginning. Over the next several years, more human feet kept appearing on beaches around the Salish Sea and Puget Sound. National Geographic notes that over the years, a total of 15 feet washed ashore around Vancouver Island, and another 6 appeared in Puget Sound. Other summaries describe 21 feet found between 2007 and 2019, usually still inside shoes. That detail, the shoes, became part of the horror. These were not bare bones. They were recognizably modern. Sneakers, athletic shoes, the sort of footwear you or I could own. It made the mystery feel current, intimate, contemporary, not archaeology, not some old burial ground giving up remains. This was now. And the places where they appeared only deepened the unease. British Columbia, Vancouver Island, Gulf Islands, the coasts of Washington state. Public beaches where families walked dogs and children looked for shells. There is something especially disturbing about body parts washing ashore in spaces associated with normal life. A remote crime scene feels distant. A populated shoreline feels like the edge of your own world. Each new find revived the same questions. Who were these people? Why only feet? Why so many right feet at first? And why did the water keep delivering them one at a time instead of whole bodies? The case became one of those rare modern mysteries that felt perfectly built for the internet. Gruesome, repetitive, oddly specific, and just bizarre enough to invite every theory imaginable. But the truth, as investigators and scientists would explain, had less to do with murder conspiracies and more to do with what water does to a body over time. And that explanation is a lot creepier than it sounds. The breakthrough in understanding the mystery came when forensic experts and marine scientists started explaining something most people never think about. In water, the foot and ankle can separate naturally from the rest of a decomposing body. And modern athletic shoes, especially buoyant sneakers with foam and air pockets, can keep that detached foot afloat long enough for currents to carry it to shore. That is why the shoes matter so much. They were not clues planted by a killer. In many cases, they were the reason the remains reached land at all. National Geographic's reporting on the case explains that all but one of the feet were found in sneakers, and the footwear itself was a crucial part of why these remains surfaced where people could find them. Once you hear that, the mystery shifts from who is doing this to something almost more unsettling. The sea is sorting people. Not intentionally, of course, but mechanically. Cold water, decomposition, currents, buoyant footwear, together creating a strange pipeline where one particular body part becomes the most likely thing to survive the journey to shore. This didn't mean every case was identical. Investigators had to identify the remains one by one, and the stories behind them turned out to be deeply human, often tragic, and usually far less cinematic than the rumors. But before those identifications came, the Salish Sea had already acquired a reputation as a place where human feet simply appear. And once a place gets that reputation, every new discovery feels like proof that something is fundamentally wrong with the water. The feet were not anonymous horror props forever. Some were eventually identified and linked to missing persons. National Geographic reports that in the most recent case it discussed, a foot found in 2019 on an island in Puget Sound belonged to a young man who had disappeared in 2016. That matters because it pulls the story back from urban legend and into reality. These weren't symbols. They were people. In several cases, authorities concluded there was no evidence of foul play, and that the remains belonged to people who had gone missing through accidents, suicide, or other circumstances not linked to a single coordinated crime. This is what made the final explanation both reassuring and disturbing at the same time. Reassuring because the Salish Sea was not hiding one master killer, cutting people apart and scattering body parts across the coast. Disturbing because it meant the explanation was ordinary enough to happen repeatedly. People disappear in coastal regions, bodies enter water, water changes them, and the sea returns what floats. That pattern is colder than a conspiracy because it doesn't depend on a villain. It only depends on physics, biology, and time. And yet the mystery lingered because the human mind does not easily accept repetition without intention. 1 foot washing ashore is tragic. 21 feet washing ashore starts to feel like the water is trying to tell you something. The Salish Sea is an intricate network of channels, currents, islands, inlets, and coastal communities. That geography matters. This is not an open, featureless ocean where remains would simply vanish forever. It is a complex inland sea where tides, drift patterns, and shoreline access increase the chances that floating objects, including in grim cases, human remains in buoyant shoes, will eventually end up on a beach. That's part of why the story kept renewing itself. The sea was physically suited to producing these discoveries. The media was perfectly suited to amplifying them. And the public was emotionally primed to interpret repetition as design. National Geographic notes that along with the publicity came hoaxes, where pranksters filled shoes with animal remains and scattered them on beaches, feeding the panic even further. That detail says a lot about what this case became. It stopped being just an investigation. It became folklore in real time. People were no longer only reacting to what washed ashore. They were reacting to the idea of what might wash ashore next. That is how a real set of forensic cases transformed into one of the most famous modern shoreline mysteries in North America. And still, even with the scientific explanation in place, there's something about the imagery that refuses to become ordinary. A sneaker in the driftwood, a wave washing over the laces, the feeling that the sea has handed you a fragment of somebody else's ending. That image is too powerful to be fully solved. What makes this story work so well, and why it still gets told, is that the truth is not neat. The feet were real. The pattern was real. The scientific explanation is real too. Decomposition, natural disarticulation, buoyant modern sneakers, and coastal currents together explain why feet kept turning up. But understanding the mechanism doesn't erase the emotional shock. If anything, it sharpens it, because the real answer is not supernatural. It is mechanical. And there is something profoundly eerie about discovering that a body of water can repeatedly produce the same grisly outcome, not because of a hidden murderer, but because the natural world has rules we rarely have to think about until they touch the shore in front of us. The Salish Sea mystery was never really about whether the feet were unexplained. It was about what happens when a perfectly real explanation still feels uncanny. When science solves the puzzle, but the image remains horrifying. That is why this case lingers. Not because it defied reality, because it revealed a reality most people never wanted to picture. So the next time you hear about something strange washing ashore, remember this. Sometimes the scariest mysteries are not the ones without answers. They're the ones where the answer is real, cold, and impossible to forget. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. And now I want to ask you, if you had heard about the first few feet washing ashore before the explanation came out, what would your theory have been?